I rise to introduce the draft resolution.
Today I echo the plea of my Indigenous fellows.
Land ownership is a very serious issue. #No climate emergency.
And I personally remember the heartbreaking stories of women.
Mr. Speaker, Caribbean youth have a voice.
They have been marginalized for far too long.
Remember the faces. Remember the voices.
Hi, I'm Amy Ramkisoon.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Chelsea Antoine.
I'm a farmer. I play celebrity cricket.
And I study endangered parrots.
Remember the curiosity.
I didn't know that these things go on behind the scenes. I know that sometimes it can seem as though it's just a doom and gloom situation.
For the average young person, that feels like it is the problem of those people over there.
Where's the conversation around renewable resource?
There is more to learn.
That was the first time I really had to step back and say, whoa.
We are already battling historic injustices, but this unsolicited climate emergency, which is saddled on our backs, leaves us with a stark choice: fight or be swept away.
Normal c'est Jimmy Fletcher. Ek me vle chen a ti koze pou a sou zafè coronavirus, ou corona, ou COVID-19, ou COVID-19. Yo tout se men bay la.
Remember COVID-19, the pandemic?
The Ministry of Health and Wellness received confirmation of 43 new cases of COVID-19.
And the reality check it gave to humanity.
Mwen jajwen COVID.
It is against this background that Dr. Jimmy Fletcher decided to intensify his climate justice activism.
That time on my hands, first of all, but I just felt, look, we saw the impact of COVID and we saw a rejuvenation of our ecosystem because that human influence was no longer there. And that really caused me to think a little bit more about why we need to do something more for our planet. And that's where Caribbean Climate Justice came about. Last year in Mexico, I attended a convening on Latin America and the Caribbean on sustainable energy. And two things struck me. First of all, that Latin America and the Caribbean was predominantly Latin America. There were probably like 5 of us from the Caribbean there. And also, with the exception of 1 or 2 young people, it was a largely older group of people who were there. And that's where Youth IRIE was born. Youth IRIE was really born out of a realization that we need to focus on sustainable energy as part of the key to addressing the climate crisis, but we need to do it with young people.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the inaugural Virtual Caribbean Youth Parliament on Climate Justice.
If I tell you that the world is going to end, you would probably laugh and make fun of me.
We are convening in this first of its kind parliament to debate the critical issue of climate change and climate justice.
Today, this parliament convened of established and empowering young men and women will tackle a pandemic that has swept our nations. What I refer to isn't the coronavirus, but climate change and global warming.
Such responses must recognize and prioritize the most marginalized, socially disadvantaged.
And we've done a great disservice and injustice to some marginalized and disadvantaged groups in our societies in relation to the climate justice conversation.
Honorable members of this parliament, and I ask you to look at vulnerable populations within our countries differently.
How may we as a region be more proactive in the fight against climate change? And that is what brings us here today.
Despite general improvements in living standards, poverty remains a challenge with rates averaging 30% of the Caribbean population.
Mr. Speaker, for far too long has the discussions and conversations been centered around an academic discourse, so far disconnected from the practical implications on the common man.
Previous generation did not put measures in place. They did not treat our generation fairly.
I even heard stories about my country importing water from Dominica for survival. It then puzzles me as to why effective measures have not been put in place to combat this dreadful situation.
It is our fight. It is our generation. It is our world. Let us ensure a perpetually sustainable environment for all. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the webinar series. So we're going to begin with energy in the Caribbean.
First webinar was on renewable energy. What is the renewable energy? What does it mean? When we talk about an energy transition, what are we talking about? What are the different forms of renewable energy that work in the Caribbean? Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our second webinar. The second one was on climate change. What is climate change? What is adaptation? What is mitigation? What is loss and damage? What are the components of that? For the third webinar, we will look at climate justice, we'll look at just transitions. You know, when we speak about this being a rights-based issue and a human rights issue and the whole question of ensuring that everybody benefits from the transition, what are we talking about? And the bonus fourth webinar that we've put in, we will look at opportunities in the blue and the green economy. The webinars would give us an opportunity to gauge who was really interested.
So I sort of knew the intensity and the energy of the young people who were engaged in this, and I knew that they were quite informative and passionate about climate change and renewable energy.
So we set as a precondition that you had to have attended all three webinars.
I think at this moment it's really crucial to engage young people, especially about climate justice, climate resilience.
Well, I was excited because having any convening with regional youth is a great opportunity to learn from your peers.
I was thinking it was going to be a bit more on the technical side of things.
I wanted to make sure that the topics were relevant, but were not too highly technical.
When I heard about this event, I was very excited because it's not often that young Caribbean people get to come together to talk about climate change or to learn about climate change. And so I was very excited to be a part of it.
I know that that really would have been a forum whereby the brightest minds and the most passionate minds across the region will be able to sit and discuss the repercussions of climate change, but more so also the energy transition.
I needed presenters who more closely reflected the age ranges of the young people who were in the convening.
Our target audience is journalists between 18 to 35.
I was not invited as a young person to have a seat at the table.
So by and large, I would say 75% of our presenters were either young, as in 18 to 35, or just outside of being young, 35, 36 to 40.
I did not expect the legal aspect and the negotiation aspect of things.
These lawyers are sharks. Lawyers will try and put one thing to appease you here, and then they will mitigate it in another part.
That was so intellectually inspiring.
I like that law aspect. The presenter told us she didn't even see herself in environmental law, but we this is our life. This is where we live, and our work gets drawn into it.
Now we're seeing a lot of these climate issues being litigated in a trade context, or we didn't even talk about investment.
And I'm very excited to hear your presentation today as well, because I truly believe that the law, we are servants of the Constitution, and we need to utilize it then to create actionable change.
So for lawyers, jump in. I would encourage all of you to get into this field. It's exciting. It's the place to be. It's the time to be there. And let's kind of bring the profile of litigation higher for the region.
We will negotiate a text that really speaks to what we would like to see in loss and damage, the issue of liability and compensation.
So we are the EIG, International Integrity Group.
For the first motion, establishment of a legal frameworks, we would like to disagree with that.
We do not want to have any litigious implications and the complexity of litigation when it comes to attribution of liability. So we therefore would like to remove this part of the text.
The Africa Bloc of Nations, we don't agree.
I think the negotiation simulation was a big one for them. We did that at the end of the first day.
Because you had to represent very quickly, on your feet, but with facts, no fiction. And that's what I loved about it, just representing island interests against other interests.
We would like to disagree with the text in its entirety. You all may see us but we are not an ATM bank.
I think it helped to get them to realize just how difficult it is to arrive at consensus within a climate change or any negotiating space where you have countries and groups with such different needs and different interests.
The group of least developed countries, we've sat here and we've listened to this very disturbing conversation.
We do not accept the global compensation mechanism.
It's like give.
You took the oil, the gas from our shores
Did you give or did you reappropriate? Which one did you do?
You want me to cut my carbon, but do you want me to cut my donation to you?
And it was so much fun. You know, it was very ad hoc, a little chaotic in the best way. So we had all of these competing interests.
Wow, I was really blown away by the excitement around climate litigation, because litigation is going to be a very important part of actually achieving climate justice. That's where a lot of the change will take place, is in the courtroom.
I've never expected negotiations to take place like that. I think with negotiations would be at the table, but they showed us the hurdles.
And there's the hurdle again. I had to put the little yellow for you because I know you won't recognize the head.
I didn't even know that sometimes they don't do big meetings. It's a huddle. I didn't know that at times they negotiate to the night.
Sometimes you can't even get a desk because you're basically moving from one meeting to another.
A lot of people don't understand the negotiation process and what can happen when you actually go out there.
So constructive ambiguity, a very critical term for allow us to move forward in those processes.
And that is one of the things that I took away, knowing that when you go out there, you're not always going to get what you want, and you have to push. And people like Dawn and Dr. Fletcher actually showed us what you have to do when you go and represent your country, you represent the region, at these international conferences.
I want to talk to you a bit about my journey, what has led me here.
That was the presentation that I think elicited the most questions. People were asking questions, quizzing her.
Each and every single one of us, I think, has a duty to, in some way, be a champion for climate change and to be an advocate for climate justice.
That really, really resonated with me, and I think that new perspective has kind of influenced me.
So I went to a fishing couple, in a small community on the west coast of Saint Lucia. And they were telling me, we've been fishing since 1968. There's something different about the ocean.
Telling that story, I think, really impacted young people, because for them, they saw climate change beyond 1.5 degree, and they saw it as really about people.
And she told me, my child, in Creole, I lost everything. I lost everything to the sun this year, and I don't know what I'm going to do.
When she related the human aspect of storytelling, that really related to me, because she really reaffirmed what I've always felt inside, that there's something more that I could do.
It was the story of an environmentalist Rastaman on his porch, seeing excavators coming in and asking, what the heck is going on here? Who is racing through the mangroves? And he started writing op-eds. He was writing to the Prime Minister at the time. He started sounding the alarm, but no one was really listening to him at the time.
So that was really interesting to hear those climate change stories and how we can actually use that narrative to push for climate change justice.
The communities of Castlebruce, Lapland and Marigot have Wi-Fi, yet Atkinson and Kalinago territory in the middle don't.
I see her in the room and I wanted to just acknowledge her because I know she's been fighting for her people.
Talk about glaring disparity. That's despicable.
I found out that Whitney was really concerned that after Hurricane Maria, the Kalinago territory, the children of the Kalinago territory were suffering.
It seems these service providers simply refuse to invest in infrastructure in the Kalinago territory, but willingly bleed out the last dollar from the veins of the most vulnerable.
She wrote about her concerns and it didn't sit well with the authorities. So I just wanted to say that it's not always easy. There will be times you'll get serious pushback. And I was really proud of you. I didn't even know you very well then, but I'm proud of this young woman.
So I wanted to take them out of the hotel and to go out there in the field and have a little bit of fun, but also make it educational at the same time.
From a personal perspective, I'm a person that loves to be outdoors. I prefer to be in the settings of the environment with nature and stuff like that.
If there was one thing I wanted them to do on that trip, was to visit that solar farm so that they could see what we were talking about when we speak about that transition away from fossil fuels to renewable energy.
Where does the sun come in? It's coming out now. Good timing.
He explained
In quite simple terms, how solar energy is produced.
The protons from the sun hitting the plate.
These solar farms, I think, were really amazing.
Just seeing the practical aspect of renewable energy in Saint Lucia, where sometimes we tend to forget the capacity that we have, the potential that we have.
So to know that it's successful here shows that it can be replicated in other islands.
Interestingly, not unfortunately, but interestingly, you're coming at an exciting point of our experimenting.
This is dealing with food security, water security, a vulnerable group, a very vulnerable group.
This is Mr. Antonio Stixi, our Director for Agriculture, and he's also known as the Blind Farmer. We also have another director, Mr. Miguel Doyle, our youth with disability on our board, and these two have taken over the management.
Here they saw a marginalized group, a vulnerable group that has been shut out from the mainstream and the mainstay of the economy and mainstay of the society by virtue of disabilities.
So we feed fish. The fish produce waste. That waste is broken down by naturally occurring bacteria in the system into nitrates, which causes the plants to thrive. We have had many great successful harvests here. We market to the main hotel down here, Coconut Bay.
And they've been able to still contribute in a very interesting and real way to the development of the agricultural sector in Saint Lucia.
Innovators is a climate change adaptation company. We specialize in smart ocean technologies, systems.
You know, Calais' solar power desalinator again is addressing a problem of water insecurity, but dealing with the two challenges that come with desalination, which is the high energy cost, which is addressed by making it solar, and the high environmental cost because of the brine that's put out through the brine management solution that he has. So I wanted them to see that. I also wanted them to see the new FAD, the fish aggregating device that he has created that is GPS enabled. So unlike FADs now, where you put a FAD out there and it could be dragged down by currents and the fishers can't find it, these FADs that Calais has created can be very accurately located because of the GPS tagging that they have.
This one right there, I think that's the one you saw on Facebook. I call it Spartacus because it's after the gladiator Spartacus. It's really, really robust. So what I plan to do with it is to deploy it in a hurricane.
And he's able to track data of the weather change, he's able to track the temperature, he's able to track, and he says he's just gonna leave it in the storm, and that said to me, oh wow.
Calais' FAD will now give you information on what kind of activity there is around that FAD, and whether the fish are actually biting, so to speak, and also collect other environmental data.
We must take a blueprint from these persons and apply it across the region.
What Leighton and Airline Lamontagne have been able to do at Fordo is amazing. You know, one, the heritage preservation, the old buildings, particularly those from Castries that I knew as a boy growing up, that they've now converted into eco-lodges, but the oneness of the environment that you have at Fordo. You know, the fact that it's still a functioning cocoa farm.
And there's actually two types of cocoa pods. There's the orange ones, which is maroon when it's young, or the green one, which turns yellow when it's ripe.
Hey.
So what you do, don't swallow or bite.
So you have a cocoa farm where you can still see how cocoa is taken from the pod right through to chocolate making.
First off, we go slowly like this. Motion and emotion.
That I felt would have been a very powerful part of this whole story for them, to see how those dots connect, you know, and how when we talk about sustainability, Fordo is the essence of sustainability. That is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs.
And then we got to see step by step, I mean from the tree right into production, the production of chocolate, and then we got to taste it. Saint Lucia stuck with me.
What Leighton and Airline are doing has a very small footprint, a very small environmental footprint and a very small carbon footprint.
Some of our leaders are too comfortable with giving up nature in the name of progress. There must be a balance.
And it all goes to show that we need to continue with our climate justice initiative so that we could preserve these types of eco-resorts and processes.
The Caribs name Colibu Caldera, Ararat's Indians, they name it the Yo-Ka-Yo.
One of the things that opened my eyes is the driving volcano.
The last eruption recorded in the year 1766.
We have our gems, and we need to harness those gems.
Again, the Sulphur Springs, another example of ecotourism, another example of using our natural resources to produce a tourism product that everybody benefits from, particularly the residents of Soufrière.
How can we use those things, create a perfect balance, and harness those energies from it?
We're trying to tap the steam, in other words, dry steam to drive turbine to generate electricity, geothermal energy.
When they were talking about the geothermal energy, which is something I've been looking at and trying to research recently across the region. I've been looking at the legislation in St. Vincent regarding geothermal energy, and I've noticed there are a lot of loopholes, there are a lot of gaps, there are not things like feed-in tariffs, and so, for investors and stuff like that.
And it's not even that hot.
Wakanda forever! It's about you and me. We come here for you, Youth IRIE. I come far from Trinidad. I'm studying to stay here, but I might be mad.
You have to agree on the resolution for energy.
It really was an educational field trip, but a fun-filled field trip for them.
I want you to stay. I will stay.
So we will begin this morning's proceedings with the Prime Minister, who also holds the portfolio of the Minister of Agriculture, Food Security, Climate and the Environment, Akil Henry, to lay the motion this morning.
This is their concept of what a sustainable Caribbean and a sustainable world should look like. And I felt the Youth Parliament would give us that.
I rise to introduce the draft resolution on sustainable energy and climate justice.
I want something that I can now take to regional and international agencies and say that this is the thinking of the young people who attended this. This is what they believe needs to happen.
Be it resolved that the Second Caribbean Youth Parliament on Sustainable Energy and Climate Justice reiterates that states have human rights obligations.
I rise in support of the resolution tabled, Mr. Speaker. As the Attorney General for Legal Affairs, I strongly submit that the legislation and policy framework should be put in place now.
It is crucial to prioritize building codes for the future.
We can build a Caribbean where energy is a catalyst for economic growth.
We should not talk the talk alone. We must walk the talk, Mr. Speaker.
By providing green meals and vegan options with few GMOs and additives to our athletes, we can ensure that they are well nourished and healthy to perform for our countries.
Again, what needs to come out of it is how do they translate these speeches to action? I think that for them has to be the big ticket question.
One of the things that we're refreshing about this youth parliament, when compared to the rest of our parliaments in the region, is there wasn't that much bickering, because there ought not to be.
Change needs to happen now to ensure that our elderly, our women and children, and our people living with disabilities have a fighting chance in the future.
Land ownership is a very serious issue.
We must integrate renewable energy into our agricultural practices, promote sustainable farming techniques, and ensure that our policies are grounded in fairness and inclusivity.
Today, I echo the plea of my Indigenous fellows. Our traditions and practices honed over millennia are under siege.
These governments should ensure that these people are not being marginalized or left behind in this process.
If our decision is in action to the issue of climate change and food security, there will be no history written about us, for there will be no one to write it. May it please you, Mr. Speaker.
How do you translate some of these recommendations as part of your own advocacy points, and it doesn't become a speech on the shelf and doesn't say, all right, well, I attended the youth parliament and I presented and everybody clapped?
I think that the people that were involved in the youth parliament are proactive people and not people who would just talk.
The issue is simple. The crisis is simple. It's a crisis that we all face. There's no need for there to be any sort of disagreement about it.
Because now we're more than just parliamentarians sitting across the desk from each other and passing resolution. We were brothers and sisters in a fight, tired, eyes red, but pushing forward for the greater goal.
The draft resolution on sustainable energy and climate justice is thus passed.
They need to continue their own individual advocacy within the communities. They need to be able to ensure that they have enough weight to be able to approach government and say that this is what I think needs to happen. They need to continue to engage with the private sector as well, and they also need to engage internationally with some of the agencies that are dedicated to this work. And once they're able to do all of these for, even individually, any of these for, and collate some of these actions as part of this regional network, I think that they can really be a very force to reckon with.
So I want our young people to be empowered and to be informed and to feel that they have every right to be in any discussion, be it at the community level, at the national level, at the regional level, or at the international level, where we're discussing the most serious issue that they will confront. It's not unemployment, it's not healthcare, it's not education. None of these things has been referred to as an existential issue. Climate change represents an existential threat to small island developing states, meaning it's a life and death situation.
Kudos and high recommendations to Dr. Fletcher. You know, he's done a tremendous job.
If you need a role model to look up to, somebody to speak to, somebody to get advice from, somebody who we as a society should try to model ourselves after, he's definitely one of them.
Dr. Fletcher and his team put the power back into the hands of the young people. So that's the first thing. That's what inspired hope in the first place.
I kind of get emotional because like this has been so inspiring. I'm so sorry. I don't know if Dr. Fletcher understands that this has been really intense. And let me catch myself.
I continue to commend him for all of the hard work and more so the belief that he has in young people.
And I'm so grateful and honored to have been a part of it, and I absolutely support, and it will keep the hope burning alive.
You know, everyone was so warm and welcoming when I first came here. We have a WhatsApp group that all of us keep in contact with, and I really do hope that everyone keeps in contact after this convening.
We are the generation that can bring about transformative change. We are innovators, we are mind drivers, and we are warriors in this fight. Thank you so much.